Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Housknecht. I'm the Associate Provost for Research, and I want to welcome all of you to our lecture today here on the Biddeford campus. It's also being live streamed, so those of you who are joining us virtually, welcome. I'm really very pleased to introduce and welcome Rick Corey to UNE. Rick is currently Assistant Professor of Intermedia and Innovative Communication Design and the Director of Operations for the Virtual Environment and Multimodal Interaction Laboratory, VEMI, the VEMI Lab at the University of Maine. Rick received his BA in Studio Arts from UMaine, a Master's of Fine Arts in Intermedia from UMaine, and also a PhD in Intermedial Collaborative Practices in 2014. And I'm really delighted to have him join us today and talk about the work that goes on in their lab with virtual and augmented reality and possible and future applications to healthcare. So please join me in welcoming Rick.
Hey. All right, let's see. Is this actually working? Okay, good. Cool. Hi. As you noticed, I spent a little bit too much time at UMaine. So I'm happy to be here at UNE, and thank you all for inviting me. Where was my clicker? Okay. Forgive me a minute as I get everything organized here. So I really wanted to talk, when Karen and I met and she asked me to come down, I really wanted to talk about our research and the education that we give to our students at the VEMI lab and how it's actually making some level of impactful difference. Certainly on our students' lives and definitely on my life. So let me start in 2008, Dr. Nicholas Giudici and I started this idea that we now call the VEMI Lab. It started in a teeny little 16 by 16 room in which we struggled quite a bit by the time we got to about 4 students. And it got a little confined for virtual reality when we needed 16 by 16 spaces. So that wasn't working out very well. So over time here, and this is 10 years later, and actually we just had our big 10-year anniversary, we have now moved into, this is Carnegie Hall, which is now officially all of the VEMI Lab space. Let me get I like to get facts out of the way right away. Administrators love them, and that way I don't have to talk about them anymore. But so we have about 20,000 square feet of lab space, full lab and research space, and basically some student mess around space. We have 5 faculty and staff, there and abouts on staff. There's 20 active paid students per year, and that's per year. They rotate. I think we're up to 23 right now. Some will graduate in December, and the numbers, so 20 is a good average number. We're about 80% grant funded. This is NSF and NIH, and about 20% comes from corporate funding that we happen to drag in. All of the work that I'm going to show you, all of the projects that we put together, everything that is out there, all of this is student driven. All of this is student made. These are not PhD students. The majority of our work is undergraduate students. And the other thing that you need to know is that we are a truly interdisciplinary lab. And when I say truly, because I think a lot of people like to say, hey, I have an engineer, therefore I'm interdisciplinary. This is to prove my point. I'm not going to go over this, but this is my current student body that exists in the lab. These are their degrees that they're getting, and this is just undergrads that happen to be in there working. So we really try to thrive this idea of what I usually call is augmenting their education. Somebody might be in psychology, but they're interested in adding new technology to some of their techniques or adding in more of what they didn't know before, or they're not going to get in their single degree. I'm going to dump a few more facts at you. We have 14 Student Research Excellence Award. This is more than any other UMaine lab. We had, in the last 10 years, we've done about 10 million in grants, so it's about $1 million a year. It's not how it really ended up that way, but it sounds pretty good. About 100,000 student grants that have come in. We work really hard to make sure the students also help get their funding as well. We pay them to work for us and to help them with their building or their new tech, their thing that they want to go out and buy. About 192 publications, of which about 120 have had students associated on them, either as a co-PI or listed within it. And the lab itself has seen, to date, 15,000 people have come through and toured the lab. This includes Karen, who's now toured the lab. Thank you for that. I hope you had a good time. So now I got those facts out of the way. Let me tell you what VEMI really is. It's an environment that completely embraces change. And what I mean by that is that we spend a lot of time looking at what technology, what software, what thing happens to be working well for the research project or the research problem that we have in front of us. And that means, as we all know, since our phones are changed every year and our laptops are usually make it about 2 or 3 years, that usually means that, hey, it's time that we go out, and start to look at something new because there might be something better out there that might make the problem easier to solve. We really encourage self-expression. This is very, very important, especially when it comes to our students, to allow them, and I can tell looking around this room, this is John trying out a bubble wrap outfit, and looking around this room, this didn't catch on because I can see nobody actually is wearing the bubble. You should probably get in on this. John would have been happy. The lab is also a complete safe place to fail, and I'm going to be talking a lot about failure throughout this. In a standard academic structure, failure is what you want to avoid. We actually kind of push people to try to fail, because if you're not trying to fail, you're not trying to push past like what I've asked, or hey, I need you to fill this water bottle up, but I need you to do it like telepathically. That it's a tough task and it's hard to do, and if you can't allow for failure, then no one's ever going to try to do anything with it, or they're going to try to arch water off the back of their neck or something. We're also a big component of this idea of learning, and just anything that's new that shows up, learning what it is. And if learning is what's going to help you for the task, we really push it. And I mean learning anything. We had one of our students was working on a project, which I'll show you a little later here. We're doing the new windmill they were talking about, putting out the AQUA VENTUS project off of the Monhegan Island. And then this whole process, we had to go and learn something about, was it astrophysics projections, in order to figure out the light tracing of, I don't know, the students learned it, not me. So that's one of the things they go out, they embrace, they pick up, and they figure it out. Also, we're an environment of respect and trust. That's really very important for us. Respect other students and trust that they're going to get it done. It's a core component for collaboration, and this is why it works very well for us. The VEMI lab at its core has 3 things that I've broken down. Human interaction, information access, and critical problem solving. And I'm going to break all those down one at a time. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm also going to mute my phone just in case my students have actually figured out that we're live broadcasting this. As I just looked down and I saw one of the troublemakers in this shot there. Human interaction. So what we do is we look at human interaction with computers, also known as HCI, it's human-computer interaction. We look at a human interaction with space. This is also known as spatial cognition. We look at human interaction with navigation, the way in which we wayfind, the way in which we move, how we get from A to B. And this goes very, very well with an understanding of space, because I don't know how many people have ever got up in the middle of the night and never turned on the light to head to the bathroom. And you usually do just fine until somebody leaves a toy out there and then you trip over it. That's because your spatial memory of that, that path had degraded over time. We also look at human interaction with information. This comes a lot with accessibility. I'll be talking a lot about BVI and accessibility issues that we deal with. We do not deal with human interaction with humans. That's psychology, even though we are a psychology-based lab. Nick Giudici, who I work with, has a psychology background, and we use a lot of psychology in what we do. Humans are icky, so we try not to deal with those. So let me talk about information access for us. We are a big drive into the BVI community, and that's blind and visually impaired. And Nick is one of the world's leading researchers on, I'm going to get this wrong and then he's going to kill me. He's the world leading research in blind and low vision, wayfinding, and navigation. So we do a lot of work in that area. And it turns out that work looking at BVI issues also translates to this thing we call situational blindness. Now, situational blindness is anyone who's sighted who happens to run into a case in where you suddenly can't see it. Now, this could be as simple as, for example, let's say riding your bike in the fog. This could be something as, we've all done this before, walk in a movie theater after a movie has started and your eyes have to stand there and adjust for a little bit. That's your situationally blind. My favorite example of situational blindness, which happens a lot, is these darn things. And I don't know how many of you people have been out walking with these things, and it turns out a lot of people trip over fire hydrants, fall in holes, jump off the sides of sidewalks. Staring at this phone makes you situationally blind to your environment around you, and we've been digging into how we can start to solve that. Also, information actionable for terrible imaginations. Now, I say this to people a lot and they don't believe me, but people really don't understand. Like if I say to you that there is going to be a windmill installed about 100 yards from your house and it's 150 feet tall, nobody has a clue what that looks like. Your imaginations are awful, they're fuzzy, and they're horrible. And I'll give you the example I give to everyone. And this is a crowd example here. I want you guys to all think real quickly of an ambulance. What color is it? Now here's my question. Who had something other than red? That's my point. So my point being is we have an imagination of what something is, and it's not usually what somebody else sees it as. So a lot of the work we do is try to correct that using virtual reality or augmented reality to try to help people get a better understanding. It really came into quite good effect when it came into windmills, which I'll talk about here in a minute. We also do information access with spatial language. Spatial language is pretty simple stuff. It's basically how, turn left or, where stuff is. It gets a little more difficult when we start to talk about, let's say, the doors, especially the doors over there. What do we say here? The doors on the left side? Because for people that are facing that way or the other way, it doesn't make any sense. Is the door on the wall? Is it against the wall? Where is it? We do a lot of looking into how that language can be perceived and how it can be pushed out there. We're also looking at information access with autonomous vehicles. And this is a huge new area for us. We're really excited about it. And I don't want to geek out over this, but the current access to let you know that there's an issue in a car is 4 beeps. And we're not really sure that's enough information for us to be comfortable sitting in a car and driving. And we're starting to do a lot of digging in this. So I'll come back in another 10 years and tell you what I did with autonomous vehicles, but that will be fun. Hopefully it doesn't take me 10. I want to talk about critical problem solving because all of this research that we do, part of this breaks down. Critical problem solving is the fundamental concept for me for education. So all of our students have to go and identify the root problems. We teach them how to do this. And then you teach them how to find and apply multiple solutions. And this is the whole aspect of failure. Look at 100 ways to do it and give them all a shot and get ready to fail 99% of the time. And to understand and say, hey, this is an acceptable form of actual learning, research, and getting to an end. And this is the whole concept of removing that fear of failure. And what we end up doing in the course of bringing these huge research projects in, these funded projects that have to be done, is our undergrads get to go and look at these projects, and then they have to learn. And when I say this a lot, learning to learn. We spend a lot of time in academia, especially when you're younger. It's basically just call and response. And this isn't me going on a diatribe so everybody can relax for a second, but basically it's like, who's our first president? Oh, it's George Washington. But we don't actually instill a lot of, you go out and find it. We all have Google today and we know how to Google things, but how to actually go and dig that information up, which it turns out that when people do that, they go down different rabbit holes of interest. And that's a whole different line of learning, and that's a whole area. And I can get in on this all day long, but I won't. But this is the critical problem solving that comes with the lab, and all three of those together make the lab work. Here's my obligatory Venn diagram. All presentations need one. It turns out that for us, in workforce development happened to be an output of what we ended up doing. We started this with, we're going to do some research, and then we found out that the students wanted to learn how to do research, and they wanted to learn more about the research. And then it turns out that a lot of big corporations love it, and so they're out making a lot more money than I am, which is good because that's the goal, right, when they get out of here. So I want to talk about this research education thing just real quickly. Our research that we bring in, the research ideas, springs off and pushes down to both emerging technology that we use to solve the problems that happen to come before us, and hands-on education. And those two put together usually ends up they work in conjunction. The students have to work with the new technology in order to figure it out. And by that, this is really funny, we not only solve the research problem, but it also spawns a whole new concept that we can go get more money for to do something else that comes out of it. And this has been a great process for us, and we're constantly seeing new ideas that are spawned from just basically trying to figure out how this technology works to solve the problem. So I'm going to talk about the education real quick here, but we've covered a lot of this, but student-centric learning is very, very important for us. For those of you who don't know, and here, I'll give you the ability to go and learn this on your own. If you don't know it, there's a difference between student-centric learning and some people call it classroom learning, some people call it teacher learning. Student-centric is allowing students to learn at their own pace, at their own time, at their own degree if they really want to start to dive deeper into something to let them do it. We really embrace that at the lab and let people dig, especially the students, dig further into what they want to do. We're all about hands-on teaching. I talked about that before, and this is allowing them to actually work with the technology rather than sit in the corner. And this is a big point that I like to make to people, is our undergraduate students, and this is not making fun of anybody, but we've had students who have come in who have had jobs at laboratories whose job as an undergrad was to clean beakers. And I'm like, okay, that's not what our students do. Our students get IRB approved. They go through the process. They actually run the studies. They actually help design the studies with us. They do everything. They even sit and do the data analysis, which I don't like, but some of them do. But one way or another, they learn the whole process. And this turns out to be an amazing methodology for how we can actually start getting faster and better input. Self-expression, I mentioned this before. It's still a huge thing, and letting these people do what they want to do. I have a short story. There was one of my students had a job, and it was to take 3 data points in the state of Maine and find some sort of correlation between them. And now, I'm going to get this probably wrong, but if I remembered, it was locations of bald eagles, people who liked chocolate, and then people who had wood-burning stoves. And the thing was, it was a very odd combination. And by the way, the answer was that most people who like all 3 of those live somewhere along the 95 corridor. But it wasn't what was the intended output, but it turned out that this person's way of expressing themselves in the thing ended up being fun. And it was fun for them, so they drove harder to get a better result out of it. Allowing for failure, I keep talking about this. You got to let them fail. If they don't fail, I say this to my students all the time. If my students don't fail, that means you're giving me what I want, and that's not what I want. I want more. I want more. I want you to find out where I have failed. Where have I failed in what I've told you to do? If I tell you to go out and design a new cap, please come back and give me something better than what I'm asking for. And that's actually been working very well for the last decade. Now scale. Boy, this is a huge thing, and this actually was an accidental output of what we ended up doing. But our students now have the ability to talk to kids that are from like 5 up to 95. They have the ability to talk to people who have almost no education, all the way up to people who have 2 PhDs. And giving them the ability to scale their conversation and teaching them how to do this and talk about any of the subjects that we happen to deal with in the lab has been not only huge for the lab, but huge for their lives and where they go and what comes out of it. And when I say scale, it has to be the ability in the middle of a presentation to answer the question of this young girl, or the ability to answer the question of about 3,000 people. And this is when we did a big, giant, it was a 3-hour presentation where we were doing live virtual environment building at the Maine Science Festival one year. And it was crazy. I had 18 kids on staff, and it was nuts. It was a crazy deal. But the nice thing about it is, it gets to my point of scale. You got a lot of people in there and a lot of questions that come from all different angles. And this is an output from the students that's been amazing. Also, it turns out if we don't have a little fun, it's not as entertaining. I have no idea what they were doing here, but I found this photo the other day and I threw it on and I thought it was funny. Also, those couches are gone now, so I'm kind of happy to see the old couches. They look a little gross. But research and fun, allowing them to have fun. Fun's very important to me. This summer, I challenged all the students to a hopscotch tournament, and I lost. And it turns out that a lot of, who doesn't know how to play hopscotch? Okay, there's just a few. All right. There was some of my, like half of my students didn't know the rules for hopscotch. I was like, this is a pretty basic thing. I thought we all knew it. So a lot of people ask me this, so I tried to put together this presentation and answer a lot of the questions that people ask me. So a lot of people ask me, how do you get good students? Well, I get good students by asking these 3 questions. And I'm a little scared. Now that I put these 3 questions, does that mean that I can't ask these questions anymore of students that come in? But these are the 3 questions I ask. Are you willing to learn? And usually I get yes. Are you willing to respect other students who are within the lab and what they do and what they put in there? And by respect, I mean it's like, respect is odd because we don't really have a hierarchy in the lab. Sure, there's a few grad students. I think we have 4 or 5 right now. We have grad students in the lab and they're working on things, but it's just as possible that an undergrad has a project and a grad student's working with them or for them on that project. So you got to be able to respect what people are bringing to the table. And that last one, willing to fail. As I said, I'm going to be talking about failure throughout this whole thing. I keep saying I want to talk about failure and then fail because that would be kind of funny to me, but let's hope it doesn't happen. Let's work out. Here are the results. All of our students in the last 10 years, I actually have this for all you data analysis people out there, I have this down. We have an increased grades for every one of our students. We have a higher post-graduation pay than any, well, I'm just going to say average student graduation who are going into jobs out there. We have a fairly huge increase in interest in grad school only because, oh, they want to hang out more and do more work, which is good. It's good for you, man. They get 2 more years of tuition. But we also increase cooperation and community contribution. This has been amazing how many corporations come to us and are interested in it and how many people in the community are just becoming invested in what's going on there. And also, this is something that all academic institutes want, more invested alumni. And the neat thing is that we have really invested alumni that are coming out of the lab. I don't know how to solve it I wish I could tell UNE how to solve this on a global scale, because I don't know how to solve it on a global scale, but I know on a lab scale, we have really, really, really dedicated students that come through. So let's get to what you guys are here for. Let's start talking about the fun stuff. I'm going to start spatial wayfinding. I talked about before, but the best way to look at this is that we're looking at how people basically navigate a space, whether they're impaired or not. In indoor navigation, we use beacons a lot of times. We have found that in our studies, this is, okay, so let me reverse it and say it this way. Indoor navigation is very difficult to do. Outdoor navigation is easy to do, and here is why. If you're outdoors, you actually have things that we call beacons. You see fronts of buildings or trees, or hey, that's a familiar whatever phone booth. Now, I just aged myself. But anyway, there's a familiar this, that, and the other thing, and you can navigate based on these beacons. Interior, when we're inside, we can't see those things. There is no areas or guides to help us get there. We started to look into how can we fix this? How can we make augmented reality so you can see through walls or have beacons in different areas? Because people get lost in airports and in hospitals and in malls, which are starting to go away, but let's say airports and hospitals. We also have the blind and visually impaired front desk issue, which is a major wayfinding problem. And by a front desk issue, I mean this. We've all been in hotels. How do you find the front desk if you're blind and the dog doesn't read? It's a real problem, and there is no universal standard. We have universal standards doors, we have universal standard exit signs, but we don't have a universal standard, here's the front desk when you're checking into a hotel. This is something else that we've been researching for quite a while and looking into how can we solve this. How can we solve mental mapping? We know that it degrades over time. How can we help people understand, yes, you lived 2 lefts away from where you were, not a left and a right. How can we help improve that over time? How can we give some more auditory cues to help people? One of the early research that Nick was working on was, this is like the silliest thing that I don't know why isn't done today. You guys all have the GPSs and everything in your cars? Yeah. You realize that your accuracy improves by 200% if it says turn right and it actually comes from the right side of the car? It seems stupid, and we don't really get into this, but yeah, by the way, it's easy to do. You just have it come out of the right speakers. Nick is doing a lot of work right now with the FAA, and we're looking at helping people navigate around airports, just how that works better. There's some really neat new stuff, which I'll have to tell you about later in indoor navigation coming out of Cisco. I had a great conversation about that yesterday, but I'm still digesting it. So we look at augmented reality and how can we actually make this. This is on an iPad, and we're helping people navigate through some hallways and get them from one to the other. And this is it's now becoming a pretty simple process now, especially with a lot of Apple's AR development kit and everything. As I said, we change when stuff changes, come out there. BVI, graphical access, we look a lot, this is blind and visually impaired again, but we look at we're looking heavily into maps, graphs, and diagrams. Actually, there is a brand new spin-off company from one of our students, LUNAR Labs, and they are taking a lot of the technology that Nick and the rest of us developed, that you can actually take these phones and you can start to access things you couldn't otherwise. Let me give you an example. We've all been in high school biology classes and where somebody puts up a cell diagram. If you're visually impaired, that's pretty hard to see. So there's no way to really convey it to them. So we started to look into how can we use these phones so you can actually use the vibration in the phone to actually feel your way around a diagram like that. And this just uses this haptics that we start to kick around. This actually turns out that even sighted people, it really reinforces and really pushes that idea a little bit further. And through this research, this 1 millimeter line thickness, that's as small as you can go before you start to lose the ability to feel on a haptic screen. This is published work that Nick's put out there. They spent years trying to figure out exactly how small of a line you can make on a screen and still be able to feel it. And this is, by the way, there's no bumps here. It's just a straight piece of glass and using the vibration of the phone. This is an example of it. Was basically on an iPad. This is a shot I took out of one of the publications we had. But basically, you can move your way around, and you can use this to find a map or move in and out. It's a great way to augment where you are or where you're going. There's also other, you can be creative. There are some military applications here. So there's some really interesting stuff that can come out of using haptics with navigation. Spatial language. Okay, so spatial language is really poor. There are people out there who have solved it, like theater has got some pretty good ideas of, stage up and all that type of stuff. And they've got great words, but for us in general, we have a big problem with spatial language. And now looking at AI and a lot of the Alexas and Siris and the Googles and all that type of stuff, they're starting to help us see or find things that happen to be in the room. And I just saw the other day that Alexa now has a thing where it can help you locate your keys. Here's the problem with spatial language. Now this is a group exercise. You're sitting here, you imagine sitting here on this end, you have a dessert in front of you on a plate, and there is a spoon there. Now here's my question. Where is the spoon? Who's got it? Make a guess. Remember, I love failure. It's at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock is a great spatial explanation. Anybody else had an answer in their head? Top of the plate. Top of the plate is probably one of the more common ones. 12 o'clock is a great one because it makes sense, but top of the plate is a great one. Now let me reverse it. Now I'm going to just pick on you because you answered, but sorry. If you were to look at that plate in front of you, and if you have your hand, the spoon in your hand, and I tell you to put it on top of the plate, where would you put it? Right where the dessert is. So there's a big problem with spatial language, and we do a lot of work into try to how do we fix this, because as we start to allow more of these computers to sort of dictate our lives, we need to start to fix some of these problems. Anyway, that was fun. Thank you all for playing there. Perceptual interfaces, we're looking a lot into how to help, I was mentioning this earlier, using augmented reality and how to correct things that we couldn't see. So as we all get, let me make sure I put, okay. Here's an example of somebody who has lost, I think this is about 90% of their contrast in their vision. As we get older, we all lose contrast in our vision. So here's 90% loss. Here it is with some augmented reality thrown on it, which does edge detection live. So basically it goes and it finds that small variation that you couldn't otherwise see. The best example of this is, let me find one of these corners. If you look up in the top of that gray over there in the corner, you can see where most of us can see that line in between where the two walls go together. The older we get, the harder it is to see. There's some great examples of how they were crashing into planters that were the same size, same content of concrete that they put in the pathways down in Central Park, and there were people crashing into them left and right because there just was no contrast between the two. So this is some technology we actually have working. We have it working live. We're actually waiting for whatever the next thing happens to be that we can project onto it. Biometric feedback, this is a big area we're playing with now. I know a lot of you folks have some medical interest here, but we're starting to look into this idea of this magnetic vest, which actually can start to, you wear and you can start to feel. We're using some sort of magnetic sensor so you can feel. So if you're walking and can help you guide you one way or another to avoid a pothole, for example. We're using a lot of augmented reality for health. We're using biometric vehicle sensors that we're really starting to play with. The CDC put out this weird report that nobody can figure out. Well, I can't figure it out. Somebody can figure it out. That basically said they were very worried about autonomous vehicles and basically distribution of diseases. I can't explain it, especially since they weren't worried about it with, all the Lyft drivers and stuff like that. So I don't know what's going on, but whatever. I just brought it up because it was a weird query for me, and I was hoping somebody in the room go, oh yeah, that's what it is. But yeah. So here's an example of using this new augmented reality. We're using this biometrics basically, this shows a heart beating, and it's a way in which we can start to help teach nurses and first responders and get a better idea of what's happening. Basically standard, just your standard phone using augmented reality so you can see the organ that you're working with. And then you put this in combination with the sensors that we're throwing into the vests so you can actually hear the heart rate along with the actual visuals that are happening so you can connect the whole thing together. This, we started this is based on a grant that Caitlin Howell had, who's been working with us. And the grant was to help, it's not first responders, it's paramedics. It's a teaching tool to help them learn at distance and understand where things are. One of the things they wanted to work on was lung punctures, so I think that's one of the things we're developing right now is putting lungs in. We're not going to be puncturing people's lungs, but putting lungs, augmented lungs out there so they can get an idea of where they would be within the body. It's working out very well, and we're getting some interesting results out of it. Spatialized audio. This is an area we're really playing around with, this idea of creating visual scapes just using audio. Like, I'd love to be able to eventually come here and set this room up and have you guys think that you're, whatever, standing in the middle of a forest. That's my little goals in life. But we started doing this on the phone, and the idea is just with a set of headphones, this is the visuals. You wouldn't see it on a phone, but with a set of headphones, you can listen to where the piano is, where the people are talking around you are, where the waiters are coming in and out of a restaurant. This is just so I can show it, because otherwise we're going to be all listening to different things that are going around there. Information access. This is the one I've talked about earlier. We are looking at doing historical simulations. This gets back to the people being terrible and imagining things. This is back to data visualization. How can we take things that people wouldn't have otherwise understood and show it in a better way? I'm going to show more of this in a minute. And we start to look at structural information, how we can solve that. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Structural information. This is the layout using an iPad, and we can start to look through the walls and see where piping is and electric wires and gas lines and all this. And I can tell you the construction guys love this. There's a little flaw, and I'll share it with you right now. It's only as accurate as the data you put in. So if the guy who was supposed to put the gas line here all of a sudden puts it over here, it's not my fault, but it's a really neat concept to be able to see through it and to get out. I'm going to show you. This is the human vehicle collaboration. I'm going to talk about this real quick, but I want to show you more about that access of information. Human vehicle collaboration. This is something we're just dying to get into, of how these new fully autonomous vehicles are going to communicate with us. We already know we can communicate with things. We have them in our houses all the time, the Alexas and the phones and all this. We want to know how the car is going to communicate with us and how are they going to believe. So if you decide one day you want to go for a drive down the coast because you want to go down Route 1, but the car is like, hey, that's stupid, that's another 45 minutes, we don't know how that's going to work. And that's one of the things we're diving into. This is more of, we're doing some test driving and we're looking at older adults in semi-autonomous vehicles. And this gets down to Teslas. When Teslas lose their ability to actually track the road, they give you 4 beeps to tell you, hey, that's not working. I don't know if it's enough, especially considering the cognitive load that you have there. Do you need to brake, accelerate, stop, turn left or right? Where are you? And now that we've seen the studies that come out that say most people are going to be on social media or taking a nap. Or my favorite answer was drinking heavily when autonomous vehicles come out. I'm like, okay, I don't know if we have enough information going across there. I'm going to show you a couple more projects. This is, I'm going to run this for a second. This is the DAMARISCOITA shell middens. And this is not snow. This is a reconstruction of a historical area down the Damariscotta River. We're going to be doing some more work with them soon. But these are all oyster shells. It better be oyster shells, otherwise my phone's going to light up here in a minute because I'm wrong. These are all oyster shells that they piled up to show their wealth, how well they were doing, and the indigenous people were, this was the way in which they showed how well they were going there. And this is a great way, I talk about information access, this is a great way to show off something that literally was just being done with graphs and, just a quick SketchUp picture. To actually put them in VR, this is a video just from a VR. You can be in this boat, look around, and enjoy it. I should have brought, we did some work looking at how tornadoes destroy stuff and where it started to look into. This is just a little thing of Unity 3D. By the way, anybody ever interested in this? We use Unity 3D. It's free for students. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This is a project we called Invasive Species. This was kind of neat. We started to look at invasive plants and how they grow, and one of my undergrads did this as a capstone, how they grow, at the rate they grow, and what they end up doing to other plants around them. So basically they grow faster, the better, more native plants die. This was a great simulation. It worked like really crazy quick. It was actually a little creepy to see plants grow up that fast in front of you. This is access that we started to make. We worked with the Maine Emergency Management, and they came to us and said, hey, can we start to create some sort of a simulation that shows, what it would be like in a burning building, and how can we use some of the augmented reality stuff that we have. So this is an example of how the smoke billows up, and then you can use the edge detection, which I showed you earlier, to start to see the structure that would have been there, even if it had been destroyed. Great for firefighters, first responders, also gives you the room numbers and who was there and what happens to be it's a great technology. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. I hope it does, but we ran out of funding for it, so I can't do anything else. This is the NASA lunar habitat. This is pretty neat. I can tell you this, on the bottom it's showing temperature levels. The bottom right showing temperature levels. On the top left, I can't tell you what it's showing. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So this is live, and actually it's really cool. We made this augmented live right on your screen. This is the, I'm losing this one. Oh, this is what we did for the Climate Change Institute. This actually shows the way in which the Earth radiates heat and recaptures it. This happens live. By the way, this is all VR work I'm showing you. I can't show you VR because it turns out showing VR is nearly impossible without an actual headset. You're all welcome to come up to the lab. We should all get in a bus and go. And I'll show you it that way. But yeah, this is a really cool thing. This shows off the same thing and be able to see through the walls. But you can see the studs, you can see the wires, and you can see how somebody could make a very simple mistake there. This is a haptic interface in which we're working on trying the ability to let people see all the way through a map just by using their finger and using a haptic touch. So basically, like we can all pull up a map now and actually look at it and get a general idea of where we are. One of the areas we're working on. That's more driving. I'm going to skip over that, although there was a beautiful car we had there. I mentioned this earlier. This is the AQUA and VENTUS wind turbine project. We knew exactly where they were going to be, and we knew we needed to build it in a way in which people could visualize it and see it. So we did so, and this actually, you could be down there live, holding it up, looking at it, and moving it, moving that information to the way you wanted to. This is great, because we actually ran a study, and there was 5,000 people out in Montague and looked at it, and the question was, are these wind turbines going to ruin your tourism experience? Shockingly, no, but it had to be done, because so many people said it was going to ruin it. This is just another ridiculous obligatory slide we threw in there just for fun. But a lot of this work that we do is all dealing with how can we take this technology, how can we push it, and how we can get it done. We don't actually explore virtual reality. We actually don't actually even teach it. It is a tool to get to the end. It's just like augmented reality, it's like everything else out there. It is a tool to get to the end, what is the research. And with that, very long and slightly arduous without my HMD speech, I thank you all very much, and I appreciate your coming and enjoying some chili. Is that right? Was it chili? Yeah. Anyway, thank you all very much. Oh, I will take questions if you have them. I would actually prefer to do this as an hour of questions, but, Anyone? Who did I threaten that had asked me a question earlier? No. All right. Yes, sir.
So in the augmented reality, what you showed looked like an animation of the heart, but have you tried to superimpose actual patient full dental x-rays, things like that. If you look at somebody, you see that 3D superimposed on those.
We haven't, but it would be, let's say, easy enough to do. Me being the one, I know the technology enough to know that, yeah, given a couple of months, we could put it together. You can use people's eyes and mouths to start to create the location for where it needs to be and then just impose it right over it. Then you can actually have, you know, people's full dental work lay up if you want. The really neat thing about the augmented reality thing was that the company that we were working with, they wanted a system in which you could go, say you're in your office and one of the outlets blows out. You could take your phone or your tablet, hold it up to the outlet, click on it, and say, and then here's the problem, darn thing isn't working. And then it gets sent it up to the database, and then when the person comes in, they can pull it back up and look at it. So from a dental side, absolutely, we could do that all day long. Put that together and you can go and stare at people's teeth. Actually, it would be more fun to have it so you could walk up and down the road and just the sidewalk and look at everybody's teeth. But yeah, that would be. Yes, sir.
One of the things that struck me is your broad diversity of students you have in the lab and the pretty technical nature of what they're doing, VR and AR. Do you have a training regimen? Do students just kind of hack and slash and figure it out? Or how do you take students from broad disciplines and get them programming VR, AR, solving these problems?
So what we do is we take the students, we take the students that are interested first. That's number one. Who's interested in doing it? And once they come in, we basically start to give them about a 2-week crash course on here's Unity, here's how to lay out things in Unity 3D, here's how to do the rest of this, and then we start to integrate them right away. There's always a project. There's currently over 60-something projects on the screen. We'll just throw them onto a project. At that point, it's frankly sink or swim, and most of them swim. And you figure it out because you're interested and you got there to begin with. The coolest thing is when we started, probably the first 3 years, it was about me teaching. This is how you do this. Now, the greatest thing is my students just, they get all happy. It's like, oh, here's a new student we get to teach, and then they just take them and then start to teach them everything that goes through it. So it's actually just this great rolling mechanism that's working out. But it's a great question because we went for years with people, say, being in philosophy, scared to death to come over and do it. Because I'm not a programmer. I've never done this before. And now we're at the point where I'm turning away far more than, I can't afford them all. So, but we're turning away a lot more than we could. But it's a great, yeah, most of this stuff is just out there to learn if you want to learn it. I think, do I have one more? I don't know what time it is. That clock is off from my clock on my desk, so I don't know what to do. Yes, sir.
So when a student has a good idea, are you teaching them how to write grants to support it also?
Yeah, I'm going to say tentatively yes. We'll help them write grants. We're in the process of teaching, how to put the grants together. Actually, it's funny you bring this up. In the last year, we've been putting a lot more focused effort on teaching students what the grant process is, what they're after, what they're looking for, and how it comes out of there. And so to answer your question, right now we're helping, but like the early question about development, until they all get to a point where they can start to do it and start teaching other students how to do it, yeah, we're helping them get out the door and get some of these grants out there. It turns out the students have a lot of work to do too. Yeah? No, huge. Community engagement is probably my #1 thing because there's nothing I hate more than researchers who just keep it in the lab. So when I say we had 15,000 people come through, those are unique people. That's not, I mean, we have people come back for repeat tours. And here's the little secret. For something I probably shouldn't put on a live stream, we don't take students. Like we get asked a lot to take young school kids who want to come in through there. And we don't take them in the lab. So we get a lot of people come up. We just had the people from Mass General came up and we're taking a look at some of the stuff we were doing. Man, yeah, as much community as I can get involved, the better, because I hate keeping things encapsulated. I think that, especially being that we're a state-run university, I think it's really, really important that people understand where their money's going.
I was going to go back on when you had the slide up about scale.
Yes.
I actually thought you were talking about scalability of, you know, sort of how you can actually increase the numbers that might participate in this. So I get your comment about how many students you get in the lab.
Yeah.
But if you were to develop a tool like that Josh just described,
Yeah.
do you study the ability to scale that? So let's say if you wanted all your students in the health professions program to be able to have that experience, is there anybody kind of looking at how you make whatever it is that you're developing that it becomes usable by everybody in your community?
Not directly at the lab. I mean, we have a couple other resources to get through it. We do a lot of usability studies to see, I mean, before we get to, like, say, a wide-scale distribution, the biggest thing that we're worried about is how usable is this, and basically, where does it fail? Because there would be nothing worse than it identifying somebody's dental records and being the wrong person, and that doesn't work out. So we look a lot at usability. We, as far as like scale and distribution, this is the scale I'm interested in right now. I mean, the idea of pushing it out, this is actually, in the last 2 years, we've had more companies spawn off from our students, which is great. But this also means this is a whole new ball game for me to start to dive into. Not that I don't have a business background, but yeah. Yeah.
Actually, your last comment gets at my question about ownership. So when a student generates an idea that turns out to be commercial, how does that work in a situation like yours?
You want the you-man answer or my answer?
I'm just curious.
Okay. My answer is if they were part of it and they have a really good idea and they can do something with it, go ahead and take it and go. And we will support you like we support all of our alumni as an ongoing thing. And just take the concepts and run with it and we'll keep going. That's, yeah, I mean, IP and all that stuff, it gets a little fuzzy, but Nick and I have had this philosophy for a very long time. We just want to figure out if it works, build it, do better for humans, and then if somebody else needs to can go take it and scale it up, please, we're all for it. So yeah, that's the Rick answer. I won't give the you main answer on that one, but yeah. Anyone else? Cool, thank you all.